So hereafter we will move on to the next lecture by Dr. P. Rammanohar ji on the topic ideal research method in Ayurveda. So I would just give a short introduction of Dr. P. Rammanohar. So he's a research director at Amrita School of Ayurveda, holds degrees in Ayurvedic medicine and has been active in Ayurvedic research for over 30 years. His extensive publications include research papers and book chapters. He has received numerous awards for his contributions to Ayurveda, including the Ayurveda Ratna Award, Dhanvantari Award, and Dr. Keshav Baliram Hegdewar Healing Honor. Additionally, he has been recognized internationally for his work with honors such as the Excellence in Integrative Medicine Research Award from the European Society of Integrative Medicine. I request Dr. Rammanohar to kindly address the audience.
So, namaste to all. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. I first of all express my thanks, gratitude to Sai Susarlaji, the organizers, for inviting me to give this talk on the ideal method of research in Ayurveda. And as was also already hinted, I am not going to give a discourse on Ayurvedic research methodology as a part of a course or anything. This is just, a very brief overview, focusing on some salient points from the Ayurvedic literature, which tells that Ayurveda also had a rigorous method of knowledge building, and how we can see how much it is compatible with modern methods of research, and where we have to build bridges, and how we can revive this system of knowledge creation. So in order to be focused and on time, I have created some slides. I know we are already half an hour late, so I would like to at the outset ask the organizers how much time I have so that I don't create any difficulties.
No, Acharya, you have half an hour of time because.
Okay. So I will proceed as planned. I prepared for about half an hour. So I hope my slides are visible.
Yes, Mahoday.
So yes, so this is the topic I am dealing with, ideal research method in Ayurveda. And I want to begin with a very interesting passage from the Charaka Samhita Sutra Sthana, which puts, the whole idea of research in Ayurveda in perspective. Dvidhameva khalu sarvam satcha asatcha tasya chaturvidha pariksha aptopadesha pratyaksham anumanam yuktischeti. So it's a great debate in the Charaka Samhita on what is knowledge, what is not. I mean, of all the knowledge that is being created and disseminated, how do we know what is reliable and what is not reliable? Because Ayurveda is a very pragmatic, practical science, and Ayurveda Vaidya cannot, speculate and create theories about truth. He has to treat a patient. And when a medicine is given, they have to get better. So the whole thing in Charaka Samhita is that if you work on true knowledge, you will get result. If you work on falsehood, you will not get result. So that is the reason why in Ayurveda we had to distinguish between Sat and Asat, between what is existent and what is non-existent. So what we conceive as existent versus what really exists, this is brought into debate in the Ayurvedic Samhitas. And this journey from what we think exists to what really exists out there, how do we verify this? And how, using that knowledge, we can apply it in patients so that we can change their condition from a diseased state to a healthy state. So, I am talking about research in IKS from a very discipline specific perspective. So I am not going to look into the broad ideas of Pramana, which I think all other experts will be talking about, but I am focusing more on Ayurveda. So here Ayurveda also accepts that Pramanas like Aptopadesha, Pratyaksha, Anumana and Yukti have to be used to distinguish between Sat and Asat. But what is interesting is that there is no scope for belief on anything, because this discussion comes in the chapter called Tisraechaniyam, where Paralokeshana is discussed, the concept of Punarbhava, whether we exist after death, is being brought into discussion. And Ayurveda says that this is Charaka Samhita, to be more specific, says this is something that is perennially being debated. And what position should we take? It's interesting to note that Ayurveda texts, they don't take the position of simply believing in it. Punarbhava should also be subjected to investigation. It should be verified whether it really exists or not. And the same Chaturveda Pramanas that we use to verify all kinds of knowledge can be applied to something which is so atindriya, which is beyond, our factual, what I can say, sensory perception. That should also be subjected to a procedure of pariksha. So earlier, it was fascinating to listen to Srinivas Varakhediji, Nagarajji and Sampadananda Mishraji. I felt so inspired. There were also discussions in the first talk itself about what are the terms that can be used in Sanskrit for research. But Ayurveda gives a very, very specific term. We call this as pariksha. Parikshakarino hi kushala bhavanti. This is a famous statement from Charaka Samhita. Everything pariksham. Sarvam parikshyam. Before you pariksha hidamashneeyat. Pariksha karma arabheta. So this idea of research in Ayurveda, at least in the Ayurvedic text, we have a term called pariksha for this, which is, the idea of investigation into the true nature of things. So the entire premise of Ayurveda is that only by knowing the cause and effect we can treat a disease. So Ayurveda is said to be triskandam, hetulinga aushadaskandam, swastha adura parayanam. So sarvam hetumat, everything in the universe happens because of a cause. Hetor abhava na anuvartate. When that cause is removed, then the effect is also disappearing. So the whole idea in Ayurveda has to see cause and effect relationships. Every time when we explain a disease, we have to say why it is caused, how it is caused. There is a cause, the disease is the effect. Now, if you want to reverse the effect, you have to understand the cause and effect mechanism. But on the other hand, it is interesting to note that acharyas like Shushruta say that we may not be able to always understand cause and effect. We should try to, but even if we don't understand, we must be pragmatic. We have to use empirical approaches to treat. So there is a famous statement in Shushruta Samhita saying, even with sahasra hetus, even if you try to speculate about 100 causes, ambashtadir na vireche, this formulation called ambashtadi, even if you give 100 logics of why it should cause purgation, it will never cause purgation. So they were very realistic also. This is very observational, very factual approach in Ayurveda. Trying to find causes for all the complex mechanisms of disease, and how medicines work, but also allowing for that option, that space where you may not be able to understand reality totally, but still be, working operationally in a successful way. So Ayurveda gives a very, very broad framework on the scope for understanding. And the Rishi Drishti was also highlighted in previous talks. This is very much there in Ayurveda. So what Ayurveda finally tells you here is also that there is something called atindriyam and there is something called aindriyakam. Knowledge can be aindriyakam and atindriyam. This is where there is a big challenge. So who should create, how do we eliminate bias in knowledge construction? Whereas modern science relies entirely on instrumentation and external tools to eliminate bias, Ayurveda, also following the Indian tradition, focuses on how to eliminate bias by inner purification, by purification of the mind. So in Ayurveda, it is not a machine that is a measuring rod for what is true and what is not true, but a state of mind which is free from rajas and tamas. Rajas tamobhyam nirmuktaha. And how to achieve that state of inner clarity is also described. Tapojnana balenaye. This was asked and also answered in the previous session. Tapojnana, with only tapas, that jnana bala, you can eliminate rajas and tamas. Yesham trikala mamalam jnanam avyahatam sada. Aptaha shishtaha vibuddhaste tesham vakyam asamshe. So when it comes to knowledge, that is what is sat and what is asat, we have to distinguish. In Ayurveda, apart from Aindriyagam, the Atindriya domain is also accepted. That makes it different, epistemologically and ontologically from the modern scientific perspective. But verification is important, and instead of external tools, Ayurveda talks about the inner instrument, purifying the inner instrument as the way to distinguish between what is Sat and Asat. It is very interesting that Ayurveda has a very open approach. So what is to be accepted as reliable knowledge? Yascha anyo vi kaschid vedarthad avipiritaha parikshagaihi pranitaha shishtanumado lokanugraha pravrittaha shastravadaha sachaptagamaha. So there is some criteria in Ayurveda to accept. Ayurvedic knowledge was continuously being evolving, and new knowledge was being incorporated. So there had to be some criteria for generating new knowledge and accepting it. So it should be Vedarthad Avipiritaha, which I am not at this point of trying. The knowledge intention, why that knowledge is being created for Abhyudaya and Nishreyasa. It should be for the higher human good. Parikshagai Pranidha, it should have been proposed by parikshagas who are having a certain credibility, then only it can be accepted. It should be Shishtanumataha, it should be peer reviewed. You can here find a lot of parallels with modern way of research also, where a research paper is published, peers will review it and then only it will get accepted. So that Shishtanumatatvam is important. So it's multifaceted, the whole process. And Lokanugraha Pravarta, what is the practical utility of that knowledge? Is it going to be helpful to society? It's not that I am going to, give some interesting theories, speculations, discoveries. If it has no bearing on actual use for society, Lokanugraha Pravarta, it is not accepted. So this is also considered as Aptaga. But on the other hand, just like Ayurveda said that we cannot always find out the hetu, sometimes we cannot. We have to accept empirically. There is also a limit put on. So Ayurveda is Madhyama Marga, Sarvadharmeshu Madhyamam. So it says even though rishis are, very authentic and reliable, but in Ashtanga Sangraha there is a statement saying we don't need to accept things also just because a rishi says it. This I found very revolutionary and very rarely seen in the Indian traditions. In Ayurveda it is very clearly mentioned, Rishi Pranide Pridis Ched Muktva Charaka Shushruta Bhedadya Kimna Pathyande Tasmat Grahyam Supashita. So even though that the Rishi's statement had a great value, in fact Charaka Samhita, Shushruta Samhita are arsham, but Vagbhada is telling that they did not express the ideas clearly enough. Sometimes it was not. So as it was mentioned earlier, it is not just the intuitive experience. We need to logically substantiate it and present it in a way that the world can understand and apply. When that is not there, even a Rishi Vakya can be rejected. This is the position of a text like Ayurveda. And I want to be very clear here. We are not denying the Rishi Drishti in Ayurveda, but it is the idea that it has to be formulated. Tasmat Grahyam Subhashidam. It has to be expressed in a way. So there was a healthy debate amongst rishis also. And I can understand, I want to also highlight that it is not a non-rishi who is bringing this critical viewpoint here. It is one rishi criticizing another rishi, saying that it is not enough just to have that intuitive experience. It should be substantiated well with logic and presented in a very structured way. Otherwise, it will not be Lokanugraha, in its approach. So just to conclude, the Ayurvedic approach to research is, we get this terminology itself as pariksha. It's a method of pariksha, where the object of knowledge, we are studying it to know whether it is really existent, whether it is sat or asat, and for that we use these pramanas. So I also want to highlight, I've tried to construct that whole scheme of knowledge building in Ayurveda, how an Ayurveda student develops knowledge, how the approach of research is inculcated even in the process of teaching and learning. So we have three terms that through my study of the Ayurvedic texts, I found out is that knowledge building and validation goes through three steps: Jnana, Vijnana and Yukti. So Jnana means Sadu Thadi of Aptopadesha. Purvam Aptopadeshat Jnanam. You are expected to study Aptopadesha, understand what the Aptopadesha means very thoroughly. Then you are called as a Jnani. But then Tata Pratyakshanumanabhyam Pariksha. The entire teaching, whatever you have learned from the previous traditions or the teachings, you are supposed to personally verify it through Pratyaksha and Anumana. Verification through observance and inference. Only at the third stage, it's called yukti, or applying it in actual, clinical situations, is the third stage, yukti. So this is very interesting that from jnana, theoretical knowledge, to its practical application, there is a middle bridge of vijnana, that is self-verification. Students are not supposed to blindly believe in the Shastra. The whole process of education was also a process of research. Where the students, according to Charaka Samhita, studying the Charaka Samhita does not mean simply learning some axiomatic statements and believing in it. It was a process of verification. And the student was expected to discover new knowledge. Buddhimadam tu swanumana yukti kushalanam anuktartha jnanaya. The student was expected to learn more than what is there in the Shastra. So it was a process of discovery. So here I have tried to make a schematic arrangement of this whole process of knowledge creation and validation. In Ayurveda, everything begins with Aptopadesha. So you build from prior knowledge, you study Aptopadesha. This is very similar to the modern approach called review of literature. Of course, Aptopadesha includes intuitive knowledge also, whereas modern scientific literature does not have that. That is accepted in Ayurveda. So when you get jnanam, that jnanam you have to understand whether it is indriya grahyam or whether it is atindriyam. This is where, our research methodology becomes different. What is intuitive cannot be verified through empirical means. So that jnanam, that aptopadesha, which is coming to you as jnanam, once you divide it into indriya grahyam and atindriyam, you have to do pariksha on it and confirm that it is true. You have two methods here. One is antaranga sadhana. If the knowledge is atindriyam, then you have to do antaranga sadhana to actually verify it and come to vijnana. If it is aindriyagam, then you can do pratyaksha and anumana on that aptopadesha, and then you get vijnana. So from aptopadesha you get jnanam, you classify that jnanam into indriya grahyam or atindriyam, and if it is atindriyam, then you do tapas and upasana to understand it. If it is aindriyam, then you do factual observation and analysis, and then you get vijnana. This is called evidence. This is how an Ayurveda student was taught. If you look at the Charaka, Shushruta Samhitas, this was a process of, this is not research, this is learning the system itself. So the learning the system itself was a process of pariksha, not a matter of belief. And once you get vijnanam, you can apply it in actual clinical practice. This is called yukti. And the knowledge that you build, all the students who study and go through this process, they are expected to create their own tantras. They have to codify it as new knowledge. And that becomes the aptopadesha of the future. So this is the whole Ayurvedic approach to knowledge building. Now there are a few more things that I would like to highlight. I'm not presenting here a very structured discourse on a methodological framework of Ayurveda. I'm just giving some snippets here and there. One interesting thing, today we are talking a lot about evidence-based approach in medicine. And I want to show that in Ayurveda we have some ideas. So the concept of clinical evidence is discussed in Ayurvedic Samhitas. In the Ayurveda Charaka Samhita, for example, it is mentioned that treatment outcomes not backed up by proper rationale is to be dismissed as chance effect. So no Vaidya could say, I treated a patient, he got better, so my treatment is effective. Charaka will not agree that. He says, if you treat a patient and whether he gets cured or whether you have to back it up with sufficient findings and rationale. Otherwise, it will be dismissed as chance effect. We know today that the entire clinical research that we are doing today is to distinguish between chance effect and real effect. In fact, statistical models are used to identify whether the effect of a medicine was due to chance or, due to the real action of that medication. So we have this famous statement in Charaka Samhita, Vina tarkena ya siddhi, yadricha siddhirevasa. That success in treatment, if there is no tarka to support it, then it is yadricha siddhi. And the commentators actually bring a very interesting concept called pratiniyamiki siddhi, as opposed to yadricha siddhi. So in order to establish Pratidemiki Siddhi, Pratidemiki Siddhi means real effect of a medicine. So now in Ayurvedic language, when a physician treats a patient and says, I have a treatment, a cure for this disease, the question that would come is it a Pratidemiki Siddhi? Are you talking on the basis of Pratidemiki Siddhi or is it Yadricha Siddhi? If it is Yadricha Siddhi, your claim will not be accepted. You have to prove that it is Pratidemiki Siddhi. So you can see here, Rogebhyo ya pramojayedityanena cha jnanapurvam bheshaja prayogena rogaharagatum uchyate. Tena yadrichika siddhya kuvaidya vyavaharo na vachya. Yadrichika siddhau hi vaidyo na roga pramokshe karanam. The Vaidya has nothing to do with the positive outcome. It happened accidentally. We are simply claiming that. So, kintu gunachara jnayena daivagado bheshajasya samyoga iti. By chance it has happened, just like gunakshara nyaya he tells here. An insect or a worm is taking the shape of an alphabet without knowing that it is an alphabet. That is how many Vaidyas are treating patients. They are getting some success, but it is not scientific. It's got nothing to do with real, medicine. So, why we are talking about Pratidemiki Siddhi? Another thing which was very important in Ayurvedic clinical outcomes assessment was, we need to prove that our treatment is Pratidemiki. So, here I am thinking these are very early ideas about experimentation that you can see in the Ayurvedic tradition. Vaidyas having to prove that their medicine actually worked because of their treatment and not something else. So there is a big debate in Charaka Samhita and Ashtanga Hridayam also, and I am just summarizing that. Some diseases are self-limiting, some do not require treatment, and some are incurable. Only some are treatable. So treatment work only for treatable diseases. Treatment is not needed for many diseases. So making claims for self-limiting diseases is not acceptable. This is what Vinabi kriya swasthyam gachadam shodasham shaya. Vinabi kriya swasthyam gachadam. There are diseases without any kriya, they will get better. So don't go and give medicines and claim there that we have treated. As they say, common cold with medicine, 7 days, without medicine it requires 1 week to heal. So treatment has no role here. So claims of cure can be made only in the background of an understanding of the natural course of disease. So here we can say that there is a lot of scope for bridging modern approaches to evidence building, but the designs have to be different for reasons I will explain in the next slides. There is cause and effect, as I was telling, cause and effect relationships are there. And Charaka is very clearly talking about how Anumana can be applied in a medical context. I am not talking about Anumana from the Darshanas, Nyaya. Here, Charaka's discourse is there. Pratyaksha Purvam Trividham Trikalam Chanumiyate. Ayurveda integrates Pratyaksha and Anumana together. Pratyaksha by itself does not give knowledge. It is an observation. You have to do an Anumana based on that Pratyaksha. So Pratyaksha Purvam Trividham Trikalam Chanumiyate Vannir Nigudho Dhumena Maidhunam Garbhadarshanaad Evam Vyavasyandyadidam Bijad Phalamanagatam. So Purvavat Sheshavat Samanyato Drushta. So this 3 types of Anumana. Understanding that if there is a cause, that an effect may come in the future. This is useful in risk prediction of diseases, knowing which person is going to get a particular disease. And the other is inferring cause from effect. If you know that somebody has a disease, then you are able to identify what is the cause. So Anumana, and then coexistence of cause and effect. So Anumana is applied, in a medical context, and this is explained in Charaka Samhita. So Ayurveda also gives its own definitions for these pramanas. For example, Anumana is defined in Charaka Samhita as Anumanam khalu tarko yukti. So Anumana is considered as a tarka for yukti. Yukti here means the linga-lingi sambandha, the yojana of the linga and the lingi, the cause and the effect. So Anumana is an effort in Ayurveda to understand cause and effect relationship of cause and disease and treatment and cure of a disease. So this is how Ayurveda looks at cause and effect relationships. For every disease there is not only one cause. Eko hedunanegasya tathaigasya iga evatu. So diseases are caused by one hetu or multiple hetus. Multiple hetus may cause one disease, or multiple hetus may cause multiple disease. So the goal of research in Ayurveda is to identify all these hetus, identify what medicines work, what medicines do not work, and this is what Ayurveda calls as the Hetulinga Aushadha Skandha framework. Now another interesting thing in Ayurveda is how we have integrated intuitive knowledge and rational empirical knowledge into one framework. This is where I think we have a lot of scope for, because Ayurveda was being very practical medical science, it had to integrate these two approaches. So on the one hand, it couldn't say that everything is intuitive, and it could not also say that everything is, empirical and based on sensory knowledge. So in Vagbhada is telling this distinction between mantra and nirmantra. In mantra, who chants the mantra decides the effect. So anybody chanting the same mantra will not get the same effect, because the tapas siddhi is different. Whereas nirmantra, so Vagbhada tells majority of what I have discussed in this text is nirmantra. And ka nirmantre vaktru bhedokti shakti. In nirmantra, there is no vaktru bhedokti shakti. It doesn't matter who gives the medicine. Whether I give Haritaki or you give Haritaki or someone else gives Haritaki, Haritaki will work according to the pharmacological properties. So that is the objectivity. So this is a context where objective and subjective knowledge has been very nicely reconciled and integrated and dealt with in good rigor. Now some of the last ideas are Ayurveda ontology. We look at the world as Vyakta and Avyakta. Vyaktam Aindriyagam Sarvam, and Atindriyam is Avyakta, not perceived by the sense organ. So Ayurveda emphasizes, this is where there is a conflict with modern knowledge. Otherwise, Ayurveda is in agreement with a lot of research approaches used in modern science for evidence building, for understanding cause and effect relationships. But modern science is reductionistic, whereas Ayurveda looks at the systems approach, more complex interactions. So we need different adaptations of modern techniques to accept. So Ayurveda says we must look at both the Aindriyagam and Atindriya experience in order to establish swasthya. If we focus only on the Indriyaga, Aindriyaga realm, we will not be able to achieve higher levels of swasthya. We will be dealing with just the physical body and some biomolecular mechanisms. So reconciling knowledge from Vyakta and Avyakta realms, Ayurveda says, Avyakta is Agama Siddha. Avyakta is coming, we get that knowledge through Agama. It is established by Agama. Whereas Vyakta is Pratyaksha Bala Darshana. What we see in Vyakta is Pratyaksha Bala Darshana. So I am here reminded of Adi Shankaracharya's wonderful statement, Nacha Pratyaksha Virodhe Srude Pramanyam. This is how we can reconcile subjective and objective knowledge, reconcile spiritual or intuitive insights and observations based on research and experimentation. When Pratyaksha contradicts, Na Shrute Pramanyam, Shankaracharya very clearly states this. If Shruti contradicts Pratyaksha, we should accept Pratyaksha. Swavishaya Shurani Pramanani. Swavishaya Shurani Pramanani. That is the same approach Ayurveda also takes. Like for example, Shankaracharya says, Nahi Shruti Shatamapi, Shitogni Raprakasha Idi Bruvat Pramanyam Lapade. Even if 100 Vedic texts were to say that Agni is cold and dark, will we accept it? We will not. So Aindriyaka knowledge has its own role, Atindriya has its own role, and we have to create a framework where without conflicting, we are able to bring these things. So this is the struggle we see in the Ayurvedic approach to research. So Tatra Atindriyarthi Darshigamye Vishaye Nasmadadinam Buddhir Prabhavati. So some of the commentators are, when they are not able to explain certain things, they are telling this is Atindriya, and here our methods of research and tools are not, possible. Now the last part I am just concluding. So we can see that Ayurveda has a strong method of pariksha, and it was using this method of pariksha that Ayurveda validated knowledge. It looked at cause and effect mechanisms. It tried to find out what really exists, what does not exist. It tried to integrate intuitive and empirical approaches to research. But some differences are there. Ayurveda is based on the idea that whole is more than sum of its parts. So we don't break down things to cells, atoms, and understanding that, try to understand how things work. The whole can be understood by studying the parts. This is what modern science is talking about. So we need two different approaches to understand whole system mechanisms and more fragmented way of doing it. So another difference is constituents versus relationships. Breaking down body into constituent parts, understanding relationships and networks. This is another difference. When you look at molecules and single targets in modern medicine, if you look at it from Ayurvedic lens, it's multiple molecules and multiple targets. So that is why there has to be a difference in research approaches. So modern medicine is very body centric, whereas Ayurveda has an integral approach. Modern medicine is talking about biomolecular mechanisms as a basis of biological structures, reduces even mental and spiritual experiences to biomolecular mechanisms, whereas in Ayurveda we have body, mind and consciousness as an integral whole, with especially primacy of consciousness as the basis, matter being only a shadow expression of consciousness. In modern anatomy, physiology is the basis of modern medicine, whereas in Ayurveda we have a comprehensive understanding of body, mind, self complex within the framework of a broad concept called Sharira. I am not going into the details. So what is here, I think that Ayurvedic knowledge approach is a very good representation of how IKS knowledge framework is applied in a very discipline specific manner. So Ayurveda and modern medicine can bring together a meta-paradigmatic framework to healthcare. I think that is where we should work. Instead of trying to create conflicts and oppositions, Ayurveda has a much broader framework which is inclusive and into which modern research methods can also be incorporated. What will Ayurveda bring to modern medicine and science is that accommodation of intuition, that accommodation of a more holistic approach to research. So I think this will be overall very enriching to the healthcare scenario as a whole, to bringing higher levels of health, bringing more complex models of health and disease, and also bringing dimensions of mental health and spiritual health, which cannot today be understood within a strictly rigid paradigmatic framework. So meta framework for integrating multiple approaches to healthcare, a three-tier knowledge system, Tattva Shastra Vyavahara, where every practice is based on a Shastra and every Shastra is rooted in a Tattva. This concept of Tattva was also discussed by our eminent speakers a little earlier, Tattvanusandhana and all that. So Ayurveda says the root basis of knowledge system is Tattva. From Tattva we create theories, and through those theories we create practical applications. The whole is more than sum of its parts, emergent properties, relationships and patterns, systems view, non-linear dynamics, shift to the study of variability from averages. These are the trends that Ayurveda, if properly integrated into modern research, can bring a shift in perception in biomedical and health research. So we cannot study the last slide, we cannot study the mode of action of Ayurvedic medicines through phytochemical analysis. Because all current instrumentation look at how to fractionate one active principle, whereas Ayurvedic medicines work because of all the chemicals and molecules. So we need an alternative research designed to address this problem. Similarly, randomized controlled trials try to study the effect of one medicine, and they are based on the concept that if it works for one person, it will work on everybody. But Ayurvedic theory is what works on one person will not work on everyone. So here we are facing some challenges. Current research methods cannot be directly applied in Ayurveda, but we don't need to fight modern research methods. We need to integrate. And with a clear understanding of our IKS perspective, and this is what is lacking in today's Ayurveda education, the IKS perspective has not been highlighted. So students are completely lost by having to forcefully accept modern methods of research. So that is my argument here, that if we bring the IKS perspective to Ayurveda and offer its own epistemological strategy, then we will be able to better use modern research methods and showcase Ayurveda as a more robust knowledge system for future. With these words, I conclude. I hope I stayed in time, maybe a few extra minutes. I'm sorry about that. Namaste.
No, sir. It was perfectly in time. Thank you very much for your views on this thing. And there are actually many questions. I don't know if we can take all of them, keeping the time in mind. So maybe one question, but it would be like, how is the Atindriya components taught and inculcated in the
Yeah,
students of Ayurveda programs?
no, I was seeing first question. Maybe we
First one.
should give
Yeah.
it chronologically.
Your take, sir. Your take. Yes, definitely.
So I
Between
can
the
see
treatment backed up by
Rammanohar.
rational versus chance and dismissing the chance, in that
Yes,
context, even modes of
modern
medicine,
medicine.
modern medicine
Yes.
accepts placebos. Does it mean Ayurveda does not cognize psychosomatic issues and placebo?
Yes, yes, Ayurveda very much recognizes that. That is why that mantra and nirmantra is there. So Ayurveda recognizes that if you can please the mind of a person, there will be a positive effect. So Charaka Samhita says, Manasah arthanukulyadhi tushtirurja balodaya sukhoba bhogadajasya vyadheshchado balatshaya. So vyadhi balatshaya can happen just by manasah arthanukulya. So placebo is something which we cannot completely eliminate in our treatment, because it is harmful to eliminate the placebo effect. Because if you are comforting the patient, giving him a belief and positive attitude, that is part of the healing process that cannot be completely eliminated. But what Ayurveda tells is that there is definitely an effect of the medicine which can be distinguished from this additional effect which is created by favorable influence on them.
If you wish to take another also, if you just how
Yes,
did
so how did Charaka Shushruta rule out methodological contradiction between Pratinimi? No, Atindriya Jnanam is for the Tattvic part, not in the whether Atindriya Jnanam is correct or not. How in Ayurveda it was verified, because if you act on that Atindriya Jnana, it should consistently produce a result. Then it is Pratinimiki. Otherwise, we don't accept it. Because an Ayurveda Vaidya, the problem is, our challenge is, patient is in front of you. You cannot argue, you have to act. You have to give a medicine and treat. So for us, it doesn't matter whether it's Adindriya or Aindriyagam. The question is whether it will produce a result. Pratyaksha Bhala Darshana is ultimately the outcome.
okay? So
No, and last question is, Atindriya
yes.
components are unfortunately not taught today in Ayurveda's education. This is one of the big, that is why the higher techniques like Nadi and many things students today are not at all trained. They are not doing any tapasya. I was part of a Gurukula system where Ayurveda was taught, especially in a Gurukula environment, to nurture these Atindriya skills. But that is completely lacking in today's education.
Yes. I think today's session is concluded. I would like to request Sai Mahodaya if he has any conclusion and closing statement that he wishes to.
महान धन्यवादः सर्वेभ्यः excellent talks, all of them, especially Sri Rammanohar ji's beautiful presentation of Ayurveda as a superstructure to adopt modern medicine in its womb. I loved it. I think we need to work on that kind of how Indian superstructures can be built to adopt modern knowledge as an integral part, but giving a bigger perspective. That has to be done across the board. And Ayurveda is a very prime example of that. We have some excellent talks coming up tomorrow also. We invite you all to come same time, 2 to 4 p.m. tomorrow. So all these talks are recorded and will be made available to all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mahodaya.
So tomorrow we'll be having four more talks from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. By MS Chaitra ji on ways of seeing Indian traditions and social sciences, Jayaraman Mahadevan ji on Indic approaches to thesis construction, and Shatabdhani Dr. R. Ganesh ji on research methodology of Indian aesthetics, and Professor Nagaraj Paturi ji on teaching discipline-specific research methodology. So tomorrow again we'll meet at 2 p.m. and I thank one and all who have participated and even delivered lectures on behalf of Siddhanta Knowledge Foundation. We'll be just concluding this with the Shanti Mantra. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayah, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Swasti. Namaste.